Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with Sarah Paulson, Tony nominee for the Broadway play Appropriate. Congratulations, Sarah. What this is your first nomination. What did it feel like to hear your name called that morning?
I have to tell you that it for me was like I, I still don't know that I have the words for it, and I have decided to embrace this. I'm 49 years old. I have been very blessed and have had nominations for other things. I've been down this road before, but never in this theater space. And it because it's where I started and how I got my, where I began. Um, it just was and has been the most special experience of my professional life thus far, for sure, hands down.
Yeah, and speaking of those nominations for other things, it's kind of fitting that your frequent fellow nominee, Jessica Lange, is here with you in that category. Have you guys had a moment to kind of connect this season?
Yeah, of course, of course. That's been really sweet too, really sweet.
Yeah. And it's your I think your first ever professional job was on Broadway in the Sisters Rosenwig, if I'm not mistaken.
My first professional job ever was understudying Amy Ryan, who was also nominated in this category, when I was 19 years old. And it was my first professional job. And I remember just like, first of all, I remember the way it felt. I went on for 2 weeks. So sometimes understudies, you get that job, and especially at the beginning of your career, you're so excited um but you just never know if you're going to get to play it. And somehow Amy Ryan booked a trip to Paris, if memory serves, with her sister. And then they announced that the play was going to close. It had been running for a very long time, with many cast iterations that had sort of changed. And so she had booked this trip that I think she couldn't not go on. And so they announced closing, and very near the closing of the run, I knew I was going to go on for 2 full weeks. And so like I was able to have my mom come and my grandmother come and all of my friends, and I knew in advance, which is the better way. There's nothing worse than like being in your dressing room and then getting a knock on your door like, "Hi, so and so's throwing up. Get your clothes on." And you're like, "Ah!" Like that's just sounds very scary to me, and that did not happen to me. But I remember it was the first and only play I've done. Although Appropriate does have a curtain, I am not on stage when the curtain rises. In the Sisters Rosenzweig, my character Tess starts on stage, and it was at the Barrymore Theater, and it was this very heavy red velvet curtain that, like, the kind that when it lifts, it kind of drops lower at first and
Mhm.
then goes up. And I'll never forget, like, looking into the wings, and the stagehand was like, gave me the thumbs up, like, "Are you ready?" And I was like this, and then the curtain rose, and the temperature changed from the audience to the stage, the like rush of wind and people rustling their playbills and then applauding the set. And it was just, I will never forget. It was one of the most visceral experiences I've ever had. And I will never, I mean, you're like, this is boring, but I am literally, I could describe it within an inch of everything that I felt when it was happening. So that was my first real job. And I did get to to do the play. It was just wild, wild.
That's incredible. I have to feel like Appropriate has must have a oh, excuse me,
Sneezed.
bless
Pollen.
you.
Remember we were talking
We
about
were talking
pollen
about pollen. It's bad here.
before we started recording, and now I sneezed. Start again.
Um, I would feel like Appropriate must have a similar kind of adrenaline rush because your character Tony just has she has exists at this heightened level of
Mm-hmm.
intensity.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like to kind of have to maintain this intensity really through the whole show?
Yeah, there's a couple of moments of reprieve, particularly in the second act with Corey Stoll's character Bo, who plays the middle brother. I am the oldest of the three, if you can believe it. Everyone's like, we can totally believe it. Uh, it is wild to start a play at kind of an 8 and then actually find yourself at some point at a 12. Uh, let's just say the way I begin the play is not the hottest it gets for my character. So, and it starts pretty hot for her in terms of just energetically, vocally, emotionally. It is, she's quite engaged from the jump. And it is, you know, it is something to contend with physically, vocally, emotionally, to sustain that. There's no question. However, it is part of the job. And when I think of the musical theater actors in this community who are doing this kind of thing every day, in terms of what is required, it is an enormous athletic achievement. Whether you're doing a straight play or a musical, it is an athletic achievement to do a show for eight times a week. It's really something, and consequently, I feel the most sort of ready to go as an actor as I've ever felt. Because for the last, I mean, I think when I just saw Branden Jacobs-Jenkins, our playwright, the other day, he said, you know, we've been running for 6 months. We've been doing this play for 6 months, which means I've been in New York for almost 8 months, which means I've been working on this play for almost 8 months. And so just, I am ready to go. It's like now I feel like my muscles, in the beginning, you know, I hadn't done a play and it'd been about a decade since I'd done a play.
Yeah.
And although it's where I started, I had sort of gone to the West Coast and had sort of planted myself there for a while, and no play had kind of called me back. Other things had come to me, but nothing had really made it impossible for me not to say yes. And so I was worried in the beginning because I felt like my theatrical muscles had atrophied a bit, and so it was a bit of a
Mm.
launch, a really scary launch. But now I'm like, let's do Virginia Woolf. Let's do, you know what I mean? Like I feel
Yeah.
really ready, raring to go.
I think everyone would be ready for a Virginia Woolf if you wanted to do that. I'll just speak for the world. Um,
That's just
but
the first thing that came into my brain
yeah,
in terms of like very challenging, hard uh, characters to play. That's why.
for sure.
Yeah.
I spoke to Corey Stoll not too long ago, and he was talking about how your character feels like this, you know, this just force that can
Hmm.
eviscerate anyone. And I think one
Hmm.
of the things that I often appreciate about your performances are every character you've created feels unique in their physicality and their voice. So
Hmm.
like when someone has as much venom as Tony does, how did you kind of make that show up? How did you find that in your physicality?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the physicality because ever since I played Linda Tripp, I have worked with this woman named Julia Crockett, who is a movement coach, um, and who's become a very dear friend of mine. But I don't know if I would ever work without her. And I had a very, very lucky experience in that Lila with this play. There would have been plenty of directors, I think, who might have been a little, not necessarily put off, but maybe felt compromised by having another entity in the room that I was sort of turning to for guidance, advice, and thoughts. Although it was sort of all directed in the physical, it still was another person in the room. And Lila was so wonderful to me about Julia. She just said, whatever you need to do what you want to do. I mean, if it's all in the spirit and the service of the play, I'm all for it, which was really wonderful because I was just coming. Julia was kind of living in my house with me. We would go to rehearsal. She would come to rehearsal, and then we would come home and work on everything. It was so much easier to sort of relate to her. I didn't have to relate to her what happened in the day. She was there, and so she could come home and say, "So this thing Lila was talking about, here's what I feel we can do physically." And so what we kind of came up with was this idea of Tony as a bowling ball, and that she kind of is always moving, internally moving, even if she's standing still. So it created this kind of energy that I felt would allow me to sort of be at any moment ready to. We describe Tony or all members of the Lafayette family, including Michael Esper, who plays Franz. Bo, who Corey plays, I think has found a way to kind of, in his life, made big decisions to move away from Arkansas, move away from even Washington, where our family really grew up, and have a life, a different life, and sort of has found a way to sort of suppress some of his hair trigger qualities, which Tony has not found any way to do that. And I think, to be fair to her, though, we are meeting all of these characters in this play at a particular moment in their lives where they have come home to clear out their father's home and to clear out their family home and the last sort of vestiges of their history, and to sell the place. And they will no longer have this um, it's not really a beacon, because I think of a beacon as being something positive. The house, obviously, Tony and Bo didn't really grow up there in the same way that the youngest brother Franz did, but it is the place where all of their father's things are. And to go through something like that on a weekend, to get it ready to sort of be sold, and then to, at the end of the weekend, basically be left with nothing by way of family connection in terms of a real home. So you are catching her at a moment where, she is, things are fraught. And then you have the return of this brother who she has not seen in 10 years, who was her favorite brother that she helped raise, who has done some really gnarly things in his life and made some really bad choices. And so I would argue, what would you have this poor woman do? You know? So
Yeah.
physically, we did come up with a bunch of things that were how to activate a person who, yes, is depressed, yes, is sort of incapable of functioning in a sort of peaceable way, but it's because she can't stop this internal ball from, she can't stop it. And it isn't until the second act, I think, in my scene with Bo, where you kind of see the air come out of it and you see their sibling relationship in a kind of, in its more pure state, and the lightness that they have between them, and how they kind of rely on each other. She basically says at one point in the scene, help me, tell me, because I can't see it. I've done everything in my life I thought I was supposed to do. And she looks to him to tell her, you know? So,
Yeah. It kind of struck me that constant motion you're describing and that, need almost to fight
mhm. Yeah,
is sort of like a survival tactic for her in life. And
correct.
yet we see in this play, it has taken over her and she ends up alienating everyone. That like thing
Right.
that helped her survive
But
makes
that's,
her
I think,
alone.
if we're really
Yeah.
honest with ourselves, when you really think about the way we move through the world, you do kind of develop ways in which you can get through the day at a very young age. You figure out what your place in the family is and how you respond in those family dynamics, and what people rely on you for, what people avoid, your counsel around. And then you go out into the world and life starts to hit you in different ways, and you either calcify around that survival mechanism and it hardens into a little thing, or you excavate it and it kind of goes away, or you like let it fucking flower, pardon my French. And I think Tony, given her line of work, which was a principal of a school, rallying, sort of dealing with all these children and parents and families, and then her divorce, her child having this hideous situation happen, very recently, by the way. It's only been,
Yeah.
it hasn't been very long since her son went through what he went through. So she's really holding an awful lot, and everybody deals with things differently. And I think you're right. Tony has a way of deflecting. It's almost like it's like a ball comes over the fence and she just whacks it back with as hard as she can without thinking about the consequences. And I don't know about you, but I often feel at the end of the play when I leave the theater and there are lovely people waiting to say hello to me, and a number of women will say to me, thank you for depicting the eldest child, the one who has to hold it all. And or someone will say to me in these very moving exchanges, I just lost my father and I had to go through this with my family. And I think by the end of the play, given where we end with Tony, which of course I don't want to, give all that away for people who haven't seen it, although you better get your tickets, time's running out. It's I do think you ultimately end up seeing how broken she is, and she does kind of put the proverbial bag of bricks she's been carrying around down, and that's what she does.
Yeah. Well, speaking of after the show, does playing a character like this with this, she carries around a lot of pain, a lot of baggage like that. Does it take you a while to come down after the show is done?
It does. I mean, I wish I could be one of those actors who was like, oh my God, I just leave it all at the theater. It just hasn't been. And I do think it's a little bit different doing a play than doing a film or a television piece, because you're doing it all on film and television in these kind of fractured ways where you're doing, the first day is you might be shooting the end of the movie. Whereas in the play, every night you sort of go in, you buckle up, you go on this ride, you get off the ride at the end of the night, and you've done this entire piece. You've told this complete story. And so it hasn't been easy, honestly, for me to kind of come down from that at night. At the same time, I am kind of relishing my time with the character. I know that sounds wildly actressy, but I'm an actress. What can I say? And I do think something about doing theater. You are doing the same thing every day, week after week after week, looking at the same faces, saying the same lines, moving on the same moment, but with different audiences every night, which bring an entirely different energy into the room. And with each actor out there, you are bringing your full day, your full breadth of experience every day, and it's different to the theater at night. So it's always different. The show that someone saw on a Tuesday is not going to be the same show that they're seeing on a Thursday. And there's something so electrifying and beautiful about that, that like, I don't want that to end. I am having, which means it hasn't become this sort of phoning it in kind of, I don't think you could do that with this play if you tried. And give the audience the play. I don't think you could. It does require a certain responsibility of showing up and really being there moment to moment. There's too many hairpin turns. You kind of can't coast in this one. So it's been hard, but kind of beautiful in its way
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
And this script really kind of encourages a active audience that laughs at very dark things that, I think
I know the moment
shifts.
you're talking about. I know exactly the moment you're talking
There's a
about.
few of them. There's a
There's a
few
few of
moments,
them.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you feel that when the audience is shifting along with like
Totally.
allegiances to the different characters? What is that experience
Uh,
like?
oh my God, totally. Well, there have been a couple of times, and it really bothers me, but it is the audience's prerogative, and it's obviously how the audience is being affected by it. But sometimes people, when Rachel tells me off in Act Three,
Yep.
sometimes people clap, and I get really mad because I'm just like, I can't help but feel that like wanting to defend her, being like, you don't. I do understand why you feel this way. Maybe you've wanted to tell me off the whole play. At the same time, think about what I'm holding. But I understand. For some people, they might be sitting there going, oh my God, that's my mother, and I cannot be in the room with this woman. Or, oh my God. And then there are other times when I go after Rachel in a particular way and I call her annoying, and it gets a huge laugh, which means they find her annoying too, or they have found her annoying in moments. They understand. And that is, of course, a tremendous compliment to Natalie Gold, and the bravery of sort of playing a person. I think there is something about that for all of us in this play, that nobody is shying away from the underbelly of who these people are, which is why I think the play resonates so much with people, is that it feels so real, for people, and they know these people, and they are happy to spend time with them and then go on their way, or they find themselves going home to a family very much like it. So it is a wild thing to feel the aliveness of that every night, and it changes. I mean, some nights there are really pro Tony audiences, and there are pro Rachel audiences, and anti Tony audiences, and anti Rachel's, and it is a wild thing. We all end up going into the dressing room. We all meet in Natalie's dressing room at intermission, and we're like, what do we think? I don't know. I hate them. Or we're like, oh, they love Bo tonight, or oh, this is such a Tony audience, or oh, they love Rachel. And we do discuss it. It's very, very evident to us when we have. And some nights there's a night where it just feels like they are all in no matter what's happening.
Yeah.
And those are the best. Those are the best. Because the challenge then as an actor and as a company is to not play into that feeling of like wanting to defend. I don't want to, like, let's say they applaud when Rachel tells me off. I don't then want to soft pedal what Tony does, and what she's about to do, by the way, which is grab that bitch's hair and pull her across the stage. So, which is another reprehensible thing she's about to do. So, you know, the fear would be, or the challenge would be, to like resist the urge to sort of ingratiate yourself to the audience by sort of apologizing or soft pedaling something. But then I don't think the play lands if any of us do that. I think we have a
Mhm.
responsibility to walk that very fine line on that razor's edge, and it's hard to do sometimes.
Sarah, in addition to this amazing work on Broadway this season, you have two guest spots on Mr. and Mrs. Smith and The Bear. And I don't know that I've seen you be on television in that way before, of just popping into shows like this. So what was that like, just joining these casts briefly to tell those stories?
To me, it was like Donald Glover calls you, you say yes. That is sort of the full stop. Donald Glover was like, sent me a text saying, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to do it?" And I basically was like, yes. He's like, "Do you want to see the script?" I was like, no, just where do I have to be, basically. Um, I just want to be in business with him in every respect. I want to be in a Childish Gambino video. I want to like, just be whatever he wants and needs me to be for the rest of my life, basically. So that was an absolute no-brainer. And the same thing goes for The Bear. I mean, it was my absolute uh, favorite show. I had written to Chris Storer in the very beginning when the show first came on, just being like, this is the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. And he was so lovely to me. And then like 8 months later, I just got an email saying, would you want to come do this? And same thing. I said, I don't need the script. Just tell me where to be. So it was a kind of, listen, I have a lot of practice with that because most of my experiences with Ryan, very rarely do you get the script in advance. So like for me, for some people it might be a real dice roll. Like what do you mean saying yes without reading? But I've basically done that every time out of the gate with Ryan. So I feel like that has panned out nicely for me. So I thought, why not with these extraordinary creators, just say yes? And it's actually kind of lovely too to pop in, do your thing, and then you leave and you see the sort of tired faces of all these people working on these long running shows and these, and I'm just like, bye. It was really fun to pop in and not have to carry the weight of something, but just be there to have in support of a greater picture. It was really nice and fun.
Well, very fun indeed. Your long running one this season will be your Broadway outing. So
Correct.
congratulations on the Tony
Thank you so
nomination
much.
there. And everyone make sure to see Appropriate before it closes on June 30th. And thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.